for an update on this. We're now joined by SABC News Correspondent in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, and he joins us now via video link. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time this evening. Perhaps if you can just start off by just giving us the latest when it comes to Donald Trump's assassination attempt.
Well, I'll tell you, the latest is that we're no longer talking about how old Joe Biden is and his mental acuity and his physical fitness for office. The entire political conversation some 3.5 months before the election day in November in Bali is now focused on the motive behind this attempted assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, when Donald Trump, as you saw in that video, was at a campaign rally when those shots rang out. So Donald Trump is alive. He was slightly injured, a bullet grazing his ear in Bali. He was taken to a medical facility, checked out. His campaign immediately tweeting and texting reporters soon afterwards to say that he was fine. And Donald Trump himself today releasing a statement on his social network called Truth Social, saying the following: based on yesterday's terrible events, I was going to delay my trip to Wisconsin and the Republican National Convention by 2 days, but I've decided that I cannot allow a shooter or potential assassin to force change to scheduling or anything else. Therefore, I will be leaving for Milwaukee, Wisconsin as scheduled today. So I can tell you that Donald Trump has left his Bedminster Golf Resort in New Jersey, and he's making his way in Bali to the Republican National Convention, which is happening in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And essentially, this is going to be a 4-day process where at the end, Donald Trump will become the formal Republican nominee for president. And that process is going to unfold. What we also know is that there's an ongoing investigation. The FBI is leading this investigation. There will be reviews as to how the Secret Service secured the area around where former President Trump was speaking at that rally. You will hear from members of Congress. Various committees in Congress will want a full accounting from both the FBI and the Secret Service as to how this could happen, given that the level of protection around a former presidents in general, is at a very, very high level. So lots of questions here, more questions than answers right now, but the fundamentals are true. Donald Trump is alive, the Republican convention will continue, and certainly the election campaign will continue in the months ahead. The question is, how will the rhetoric change given what transpired in Pennsylvania overnight?
Certainly business as usual for Donald Trump. But let's go back to that incident, Sherwin. One would also ask, what do we know about the shooter? We understand that, of course, he was killed by the Secret Service, and we understand that he is a 20-year-old. But what do we know so far about him?
Yeah, he's 20 years old. His name was Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, a town about 1 hour away from Butler, Pennsylvania, where the rally was taking place. He remains he's been called by the FBI a subject involved in the assassination attempt. So they haven't qualified him as the assassin. There's still an investigation ongoing. But information about his motives, his history, his political motivations and persuasions remain unknown at this time. You heard from a former classmate speaking in our clip just before this, that this was an individual that was bullied at school, that was a bit of a loner, kept to himself. But beyond that, we really don't know what the motive was here, what pressed this individual to take this very bold action. I mean, just imagine being, a lone gunman with a long rifle positioned on a rooftop about 120 to 150 meters away from where the former president was speaking. The New York Times in Bali at this hour is reporting that the building from where the shooter fired from at the rally was outside the designated perimeter of the rally and therefore not secured by the Secret Service. So what the Secret Service is saying is, we had our ducks in a row in terms of securing the immediate perimeter and area around where this rally was going to take place, ensuring that people entering the venue were unarmed, right? They've got these metal detectors that are commonplace at events like this. And this shooter was positioned on a building outside of that perimeter. So and the purview of securing the outside area was for local law enforcement. So the Secret Service is already saying, this is not our agency's responsibility. That was the purview of local law enforcement. So could it be state authorities? Could it be city authorities in Butler, Pennsylvania? But already we are beginning to see fingers being pointed here. But still very early yet. There is an investigation that will be handled not by the Secret Service, but by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? And so they will be investigating what transpired here. The Secret Service in itself is going to take a look at whether they could have done more based on the parameters within which they work, as to whether they could have done more to secure this area. So a lot still in the works here, a lot of movement in terms of how federal authorities, the FBI, the Secret Service, and local law enforcement will come together to really establish the facts and really the lessons learned, so that we don't get a repeat of this in the future.
And Sherwin, one really wonders when you look at what has transpired at this Trump rally, and how it could potentially affect his presidency campaign, and whether he could even ascend to the Oval Office. Does this have the potential to propel him to the Oval Office?
Yeah, does it have the potential to give him a real boost, right? The polls still say, despite that halting performance, that dire performance by the incumbent President Joe Biden in that debate on the 27th of June, you haven't really seen the polls move in a big direction in terms of Donald Trump winning the day. So it's still pretty much neck and neck nationally. Donald Trump has the edge in a number of swing states. So the question is, does this incident propel Donald Trump in terms of extending his lead over Biden in the polls? We haven't seen that yet. It's still too early to say that. I can tell you, I've been hearing reports about when an attempted assassination failed against former President Ronald Reagan in 1981, and they say Reagan's popularity shot through the roof by about 20 points. Look, it's early days yet. People are very well accustomed to the individuals that are running, right? Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So your support for either candidate is baked in. It's unclear how this failed assassination attempt is going to move the needle. But Donald Trump, in many ways, has an opportunity really to come out and really echo what he has been saying on social media, echo what current President Joe Biden has said, and echo what political leaders across the political spectrum in the United States are saying today, that the goal in the United States needs to be unity. You heard there from President Biden talking about, assassinations are not the American way. And so the question is, do these political leaders, the principals in both these parties, tone down the rhetoric and really talk more about policy rather than castigating the individual, right? They've got very different policies. They have very different dispositions as it pertains to how politics is run in this country. Will they now focus on the substance of running a political campaign for president, or will they revert when time allows to those personal attacks that have become quite commonplace in presidential campaigns in the United States?
And Sherwin, perhaps let's talk about the mood since this took place in America. What is the mood like from Americans in terms of what has transpired? I mean, even in South Africa, we were all shocked by seeing what took place last night.
Well, Mbali, I'll tell you, in the era of internet and social media, the mood sometimes is very quickly reflected on those platforms, and it's not pleasant to observe. First, there were people joking about whether this was a staged assassination, whether that was tomato sauce on the former president's face. And then, of course, the facts started coming out, right? The fact that an individual was shot there, a 50-year-old former firefighter in Pennsylvania was killed by the gunfire. 2 attendees at that rally very seriously injured. The president himself grazed by a bullet, having to be rushed off to a medical facility to be checked. Fortunately, nothing too severe. And so, there's a lot of rhetoric that social media provides for. The two sides certainly will not unify on social media. It is very, very antagonistic. The political climate in the United States has been really epitomized by attacks, a dislike for the other side, the othering of people, whether it's immigration or racial groups, a lot of difference here. And so it's really going to be incumbent and very interesting for us as observers and journalists to observe how the temperature is going to be lowered or raised in the weeks and months ahead. I can tell you there will be a lot of people, Trump supporters in the main, that are very, very upset that this has happened. There will be fingers pointed at the left. The Biden campaign the Democrats in general, that it's their words and their rhetoric. But let's also not forget that it was Donald Trump himself, his son, Don Jr., that ridiculed and mocked Nancy Pelosi's husband when he was attacked in his home in San Francisco, when this attacker barged through the front door looking for the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and put a hammer to Paul Pelosi, who was 80 years plus of age, to the head, and he was rushed off to hospital. So another failed assassination attempt targeting the former Speaker of the House. So what politicians say, what principles of parties say is very important. Donald Trump is the victim here. But of course, let's not forget that he mocked people that faced similar circumstances to him in the past.
Certainly, Sherwin, thank you so much for your time and for that update. That's our SABC News correspondent in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, just giving us an update there in terms of that assassination attempt of the former U.S. President Donald Trump.